But Vilfredo Pareto thought that, well, maybe it's not bringing real human happiness or whatever. And later it came, there was another paper later by Irving Fisher of my own university, Yale University, published in 1918. And he said, you know, the trouble with this theory is this word utility that economists have picked. It kind of equates what people choose to do with their fundamental well-being. The philosopher Jeremy Bentham in the late 18th, early 19th century founded a whole branch of philosophy based on what's called utilitarianism. And he said it's simple common sense that the only basis for any moral judgment ultimately is human happiness, or he called it utility. I think Bentham was fishing a little bit by picking the word utility instead of whims or gratification or pleasure, because they all have different sounds. Utility sounds the most deep, and of course you want to maximize people's utility. But Irving Fisher said he was hunting around for a better word for what it is that people maximize. And he came up with wantability. Sometimes you want something, right? Not necessarily in your best moments. You just want it. And that's kind of a psychological phenomenon. People are starting to doubt that we can never really measure happiness. For example, Danny Kahneman did an experiment, famous experiment, in which he asked subjects to dip their hand in a bowl like that of ice water for 60 seconds. And he asked them to, something like on this, a 1 to 10 scale, how bad was that? Actually, to hold your hand in ice water for a minute gets unpleasant. Try it sometime. But then the second experiment was to ask a different group of people to hold their hand in the thing of ice water for 90 seconds. But there was hidden in the thing was a little heater that could warm the water up for the last 30 seconds so that it wasn't quite so cold. Then they asked them later to rate their experience. How unpleasant was that? Well, they felt much better about it, as if they prefer to go over 90 seconds rather than 60. But he said logically it can't be right that they're better off with 90 seconds in the ice water. So it said people don't really know what they want, and that's the problem. So we start out in our book with very simple examples, and one of them is Cinnabons. I don't know if you have them in the UK. You must have them some. You've heard of the brand of cinnamon bun called Cinnabons? Anyone? You have them here in the UK? Okay. Cinnabons is a company that just makes cinnamon buns. Okay. And they're wildly successful. I read that they have over 900 outlets worldwide. So you wonder, where does that success come from? What is it? Are they helping people maximize their utility? Well, I have some doubts about it because the cinnamon buns have almost 900 calories each. But they somehow have a marketing strategy that works. We were wondering just what it is. One thing we noticed is they tend to be in airports or train stations where people are standing around doing nothing, and they bake them on the premises, and you smell the cinnamon. Maybe that's like a pheromone. Who knows? They experimented with it, and it works. People come to them, so they just grow. It's automatic. And they tend to put them right where you are going to be tempted. This was the epiphany that George described to me one day. That's what capitalism is. If there's anything that would tempt you, it's there. Be sure. Any temptation is always right there, unless it's unregulated. Unless it's regulated. I'm sorry, I'm a little... Another example, another example that we talk about in the book, it's actually based on a book by Natasha Schull called Addiction by Design. And it's about machine gambling. So she chronicles in the book that there's been a growth towards machine gambling in recent decades. Notably the slot machine. Gambling used to be you invite a few friends over for a night of poker, and you have a social event, and play for money and make it a little bit more exciting. But that isn't the trend in gambling. It's toward you isolated alone with a machine. And why is that? It's because they can design the experience much better to addict you and trap you with it. So have you ever been to a gambling casino where they have slot machines? They used to have a crank that you'd pull down to operate it, but they've decided that that tires people and it slows them down. They've computed that the optimal time between gambles is 3.5 seconds. Optimal in the sense, you understand this, profit maximizing optimal for them. They've also done a lot of research on slot machine design. One thing they've discovered is don't ever give them an excuse for stopping, because they're sitting there pressing a button now. They used to, when you won the slot machine, coins would come pouring out, and that was considered dramatic and exciting. But they don't do that anymore because they've discovered that once the coins come pouring out, you have to find somewhere to put them, and you have a little problem. It disturbs the rhythm of repeated gambling. So now what they do is they have an artificial coin clinking sound that comes out as a audio file, and they've got it so that you can keep on betting without interruption even after you won. So this kind of thing will be rewarded in a free market economy if there isn't any regulation against it. So I can tell you that there's some sort of regulation or moral values. Otherwise, there would be 3 slot machines there. There would be 10 back there. And even in Nevada, which is the most favorable to gambling because it's their state pastime, someone came to the Nevada Gaming Commission and asked for approval to put gambling machines attached to cash registers in convenience stores so that when you buy something, instead of taking the change, you can gamble it on the spot. Now, Nevada, if you've ever been there, when you arrive at the Las Vegas airport, the first thing you hear is the noises from the slot machines. They're all over the airport, everywhere you go. But they don't have these. The Nevada Gaming Commission said that's going too far, even for Nevada. So what you have to do is think about what the world would be like if there were no regulation. So what we go toward in this book is the concept of fishing equilibrium. That what actually happens, it isn't that people maximize a utility function subject to a budget constraint. There's another step in the middle. You have the marketing people deciding on, your utility depends on the products you consume and the marketing. And that you have a step, the marketing people are increasingly important in modern civilization. And they try to alter your utility function subject to the cost of doing that. So one thing this isn't new, by the way. Our book there are antecedents of this book, many antecedents of this book, but maybe with less of a focus on economic theory. But what they try to do is what we call story grafting, that they try to get you they know that people's identity is important to them, who I am and why I'm a good person, and what's my story. Everyone has a life story. So one common way of advertising on television particularly is little skits. So they have these 30-second spots, and they'll show a group of people doing something. But they've targeted you. They know the demographics of the station, and they know that they'll tell a story that's ingratiating to you. And they'll show you their product being used, so that you come around starting to think that that product is necessary for my utility, what I want. So this has been emphasized before. Vance Packard in his 1957 book,
I'm here with my 2 buddies in the airlock. Actually, these are 2 spacesuits that are ready, primed up to go outside, as we call it, to go do a spacewalk.